Hi, this is Shay Bynes, founder and chief fire igniter of Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur and the host of the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur podcast. What you're about to hear is a replay from last week's expansion talk with our CEO, Phil Bynes, and Latara Venice, our director of culture, on the topic stewardship and generosity. This is a continued conversation around, really upgrading our kingdom capacity. Remember, you have the opportunity to join in live to these conversations on Zoom on Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern. So if you want to receive the notifications on how to join us, be sure to subscribe to our email list at kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com/connect. And for those who can't join live, no worries, because we will continue to share the replays right here on the podcast. So listen in and enjoy this replay of the expansion talk on stewardship and generosity.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for another eTalk episode. If I were to say what episode this was, I couldn't tell you. We've been doing this for few months now. And so this is really good. And we love that you all come. Some of you every week you're here, and we thank you for that. As often as you come, we appreciate you. I am Latara Venice, and I am the director of culture for Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur. And we are here with the CEO, Phil Bynes, and we're going to be having another conversation today that is sure to kind of stir your mind and probably even elevate your thinking. I think a lot of these talks, which is a purpose, I believe, is to help elevate your thinking, like kingdom thinking. When I say elevate, that's what I'm talking about, that we learn to elevate our thinking to be more like Christ and change our thought patterns. And so that's what I love about these conversations. And so today, Phil, we're still on capacity upgrade, which I think is perfect. And we're looking at basically stewardship and generosity. So I think this is going to be good.
Yeah, for sure. A couple of months ago, God highlighted to me that there is a vast difference between stewardship and generosity. And a lot of times when we think about the two, we couple them together, which is good. They work hand in hand. But, the word that he gave me is we have to decouple them, in order to maximize both of them, because they actually are exercising different areas. So I'm going to read the opening statement I have here and we'll jump into it. So I have stewardship and generosity are separate disciplines that need to be mastered for a financial capacity upgrade. And we can look at it outside of the financial arena as well, but we're going to look at it in finances because it'll be easier for us to see it this way. All right. Too often we look at those two being stewardship and capacity. Stewardship and generosity. As if they are always connected, but they are not. They work in two completely different realms. And if we don't catch that, we will always be limited in our financial capacity, right? And so the next thing I have here is stewardship, the definition, the conducting, supervising, or managing of something, especially the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. And generosity, the process of being liberal and giving, open-handed, marked by abundance or ample proportions, right? And so, with those definitions, I think we'll take a pause here and find out, what do you think? What do you think about that? Have you ever thought about the difference in the definition of stewardship and generosity before? Have you always looked at them together, coupled together, like they can't be separate? Or what's going on with you? What's in your mind? How do you think?
And as I'm thinking about it, overall I've never really had a thought of them together. I think I've always seen them as separate, but working in unison, if that makes sense. Like they work as partners, because if you're not a good steward of your money, you can't, or you're just a good steward period, you can't be effectively generous, right? And I think that whether it's financial, mental, emotional, but this is finance, and I love this, that we have to really see them, that's how I've always seen them, kind of like not even twins, just working together, collaborating, so that as we're good stewards, we're being generous. And as we're being generous, we learn to be good stewards. So yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Anybody else? Y'all have anything to say? You're in the comments.
Tiffany agrees with me. I like you, Tiffany. That's good.
Good. Well, there's something that I said to my wife, and it really challenged that whole ideal of stewardship and generosity, always working hand in hand. And we're gonna go there and we're gonna look at it right now in Luke chapter 16, verse 1 through 13. If you can read it, Latara.
I sure can. I have it pulled up. Okay. All right. So we're reading Luke 16, verses 1 through 13. And the first version that comes up for me is New International. So that's where we're going to come from. Jesus told his disciples there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, "What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer." The manager said to himself, "What shall I do now? My master has taken away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do. I know what I'll do so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses." So he called.
Pause. That's good. So far we're talking about stewardship. In that verse, he was not a good manager. His manager asked him to give an account. And so this is what was happening. He's like, "Oh, shoot, I got to give an account. I haven't done good with this. What am I going to do?" And so I wanted to pause there, because now what he's about to do is he's going to enter into generosity. But go.
Okay. All right. So he called in each of his master's debtors. He asked the first, "How much do you owe my master?" 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it for 450. Then he asked the second, "And how much do you owe?" 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, "Take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light.
Pause.
Okay.
That was Jesus that just said that.
Mm-hmm.
The people of this world operate. What was that 9 says again?
Hold on, let me go back.
Verse 9.
Okay, hold on. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light.
Why would Jesus commend this bad steward? Jesus is actually, in his wording right now, he's kind of commending this bad stewardship. Now, he's going to come against bad stewardship in a moment. But first, I wanted to show this separation, because the guy was a bad steward. Then he shifted to generosity. He started giving away stuff, even though it wasn't his to give away. He was giving away stuff. Then his master said, he commended him. "Wow, you're shrewd. You did this. I was going to fire you, but then you became shrewd and you did this to curry favor with other people," right? And then Jesus says, the people of this world are more shrewd. And I'm like, it's actually Jesus is commending this in a way, right? He's not commending the bad stewardship. He's commending the generosity, decoupled right there. Yeah. And that's the part I wanted to highlight. Okay, now you can continue. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think we just finished 9. So.
Okay. Actually starting at 9.
Okay.
I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings.
Into eternal dwellings. Use worldly wealth so that when it's gone, when you no longer have it, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Okay, continue. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I just have a quick joke about that. My mother said, when she said, I said, well, Mama said, well, years ago, what are you leaving your family? What you leaving us? She was like, I'm not leaving nobody nothing. When I die, I'm a. So I'm going to tell her, look, Mom, there's a scripture. Okay, let me keep reading. Oh gosh, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money.
Mhm. And so the thing that I really wanted to highlight there was just the decoupling of the two. Like, you can be commended for being generous, and there's a reward that comes with generosity, even if you weren't a good steward. It goes with the scripture that says, there's some that give more than they should, and they seem to never run out. And then there's some that hoard more than they should, and they tend to lack. Like, they're being good stewards by holding on to the money, right? They're not spending it loosely, but there is something that happens when you are not liberal with giving, right? So it's two separate disciplines that's happening, right? If you go too far on the extreme of not being a good steward, then you don't get the responsibility of managing things, and specifically managing things on the earth, right? And God's definitely not going to give you, if you're not faithful with unholy mammon, he's not going to give you spiritual things to manage.
Yeah.
But it also goes vice versa. If you're not liberal with what you have, if you don't give generously, then generosity is not going to find its way to you.
Yeah.
And I think that challenges what we've learned about being a good steward for so long, because we're so heavy on being a good steward. And what I said to my wife that time when we were studying this, I said, stewardship is about what you manage in the earth.
Yeah.
Generosity is about what you're getting in heaven. So when you are generous, that goes straight to your heavenly account. And out of the heavenly account, you have finances come back. Now, if you're not a good manager, it's going to always seem like it's almost like God has to provide daily manna all the time for you. But the truth is, the manna is always going to be coming if you're liberal with how you give, right? And so, and I know this is challenging, and so I want you guys, because this is still an opinion, you can combat this, whatever you want to do, but I wanted to kind of highlight this and bring this to the forefront, because generosity and stewardship don't have to be on the same level or in the same spectrum.
Yeah.
But if you are a good steward with your generosity, you're going to find that you have plenty coming back to you. And if you have the right heart in your stewardship, you'll find that you're able to manage more.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I was sitting up here kind of writing notes, and a couple of things that I noted about the gentleman is that he made a quick course correction. He was like, how can I change this? Because I can't afford to lose my job. So how can I change this? What can I do? And he became generous with what he was called to steward, right? So and in the eyes of the master, it was like, okay, he gets it, right? He's getting it. And I thought that was really good. And that the lesson there is there's always course correction, right? Because sometimes when we're trying to steward something, we might mess up. Sometimes when we're trying to be generous, we might not know what it looks like for us to be generous, and we might get it wrong. Or, it's just like when we had the house fire and someone gave us a box of clothes full of cat hair. And it was like, we were allergic to it, we had to throw it out. So that was generosity, that was like, you didn't do that the right way, because really what you told me is that I'm giving you some junk that was kind of left over. Here you go, it's full of cat hair. So that was like backwards generosity. Whereas other people were like, what do you need? And they were generous in the area of what our family needed at the time, because we lost everything, right? So they were generous in that area, and as a result, and me being where I was mentally, I couldn't even coach, because a few days later, my nephew was murdered. So all this stuff happened. I couldn't coach because I couldn't make money. So enough income came in to where we were literally able to live off of for almost 6 months until we got into this place, right? That's generosity that is properly guided, if that makes sense. Like you used wisdom to understand how to be generous. And that was really important because the cat hair was making us sick. We couldn't even wash it. I said, just throw that out because it was of no use to us. But then the money, it was over and above what I would have made in 6 months anyway. Right. And so we were able to move in here and then buy stuff for the house and things like that. That's wise generosity. I think there's a wisdom to generosity because sometimes we give to be seen, and that's not it either. Right. And so there has to be a wisdom to the generosity that we're moving forward in. And that's what this gentleman here, he used wisdom. He was like, okay, wait a minute, what can I do? Because I don't want to lose my job. What can I do and how can I change it?
And he was definitely going to lose his job. He was losing his job. But what can I do? How can I be generous to somebody else so that they can also show generosity back to me? Because here it is again. He was stewarding generosity in that moment. He was a bad steward of the management that he was called to. But in the instant, he began to steward generosity.
Yeah.
If I give generously by taking off from this bill, it's not going to help me keep my job because even now I'm still being a bad steward, right? So I'm going to lose my job. But I'm stewarding generosity because they will invite me into eternal, like what will happen is because I was generous, I'll always have a place to go. So he became a good steward in an instant of generosity.
Yeah.
Right. So he was a bad general steward. And then he shifted stewardship to generosity. And there was increase that comes from that.
Yes,
right.
That's good.
And concerning the heart issue, that's what verse 14 through 16 talks about. Jesus dealt with the Pharisees and Sadducees because after he said this parable, they were feeling some kind of way because they love money. So we'll jump back in. We'll read that in 14. I didn't give it to you, but if you can,
I pulled it up. Okay.
14 through 16.
14 through 16. All right, let me read. The Pharisees who loved money heard all this and were sneering at Jesus. He said to them, "You are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your hearts. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. The law and the prophets were proclaimed until John. Since that time, the good news of the kingdom of God is being preached, and everyone is forcing their way into it."
Yeah. So you hear that, like God's looking on the heart, and the things that people value in their heart, many times it's detestable to God, even if it looks like it was good stewardship. Like, you heard the one story where Jesus was like, when he was talking about how they're supposed to honor their mother and father, but they would declare something Corbin so they wouldn't have to give it to their parents, right? That's because in their heart, they, although they were saying they were being good stewards, wickedness was abounding. And it's the same thing in our generosity. Sometimes we can do things that look generous, but if it's motivated by the wrong heart, then God's like, there's no reward for that. You've already got your reward. You got your reward from the people saying that, oh, this person's so generous, because he knew what was in your heart. So he's showing us even a different principle here. Like, don't get it twisted. Don't think that just because you're looking like a good steward or just because you're looking like you're generous, that means that I have to move on your path. I know what's in your heart, and I'm going to move based off of your heart posture.
Yeah.
And
that's
so,
good.
yeah.
That's good. That's really good. That's really good. So many lessons. Anyone else? You got anything you guys wanted to come up to the stage? Anything you feel led to share or say about stewardship and generosity? I think that this is such a good example of what it looks like, right? Because like you said, he was going to lose his job anyway. He was a bad steward. So that was one thing. And it was like, okay, so that's the lesson learned is I have to learn how to be a better steward, right? But I'm going to be generous because of. And so I really, I think that, I'm going to go back and I have to read this one again because that's a good one.
I know this is challenging. And so I want you guys to be truthful now. If in the comments, if you're being challenged and you ain't feeling Phil right now, it's okay to say, I ain't feeling that. I don't know. I ain't in agreement with that. Right. But I want to shine a light on this perspective because I'm seeing and I actually am practicing something else right now. And I saw something come out of what I was practicing. And so that's going to be kind of like my proof point at the end. I'll tell you guys about that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you got something, go ahead and share. If you don't, we'll move on.
Yeah. It's funny because in thinking about stewardship and generosity, right? I talked about the generosity of, the people when we lost the house to the, fire.
Mhm.
And then we were with my sister for 6 months and we ended up here. And then what happened is one of the things my mom taught me growing up is that no matter where you live, whether you rent or you buy, you take care of it. And you treat it like it is yours, right? And so, there was not a place that she rented, the house that we own, anything where we didn't take care of it. So when I moved in here and I found out my responsibilities, like I was in charge, I had to take care of the yard. When I moved here, whoever had it before, the yard was horrible. And so, I did a work to take care of the yard, and her mother-in-law was the one, her and her husband, they would come and do repairs if I called for repairs or whatever. And she always had a good report about how we took care of this house. And so when they offered for us to buy the house, her message to me was, we've been watching how you've taken care of it. And so we want to bless you with the opportunity to buy it. And I didn't have to buy it at market value. They gave it to me way cheaper, like I think about $15,000-$20,000 cheaper than market value, because of how we took care of the house, right? Yeah. So the generosity got us in here, and then my stewarding, right, us taking care of it, making sure it's clean. She didn't have to do no floor. Every thing we needed fixed was always something that wasn't on us. It's because the house is an older house and things just had to be upgraded sometimes. It wasn't because we did anything backwards or wrong, because she said, my mother-in-law speaks of you guys all the time and how you're one of the best tenants that we have. So we want to offer you the house. That was such a blessing for us.
And what we miss in that sometimes, because we think that we were just operating in stewardship, stewarding what God has given us, you are actually operating in generosity as well, because it's not your responsibility to, make sure the lawn looks good. You don't own a house, unless it was verbally put in the lease, right? But this is what happens. A lot of times these things are coupled together. You're a good steward and you're being generous. And so there's increase that's coming. It wasn't just from the stewardship, it was from the generosity as well. And that's why I think it's so important for us to really uncouple this thing, so that we can see that there is truly a difference. Even like the generosity piece that you talked about, the person that gave you the cat hair, right? You can tell that their heart wasn't, there's like, oh, they'll be happy to get whatever they get, right? That's a hard issue. So their level of generosity, who knows what type of reward they got from that? If they got any reward at all, right? Because if their heart was, oh, this is an opportunity to get rid of some junk, then God's like, oh, that was junk to you? Okay, so I'll reward you based off of what it is that you just gave. You gave junk, I give you back junk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, man, that's so good. Let's go to Matthew 25 and verse 29.
Okay. All right. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them.
Okay. So whoever has, the word has is like, it's open-ended. He's not saying whoever has money, whoever has trees, whoever. It's like whatever you have. If you have it and you operate in what you have, you'll be given more. So if you have generosity and you operate in generosity, you'll have generosity coming towards you. If you have stewardship and you operate in proper stewardship, whatever you have, it will come back towards you. So stewardship is the vehicle in which we can kind of see how we're managing something, but whatever it is that we're managing, we'll get more of. And so if we think about generosity outside of that, then we can see how, like the widow woman that gave the mite at the for a tithe, and Jesus said she just gave more than anyone else because she gave out of her need. She didn't give out of her excess.
Right.
She gave knowing, oh, I don't have that much. So the measurement that she gave was so much bigger, even though it was less than what other people gave. Like God gives us back in proportion to our level of generosity. And so one of the things that I've done recently is me and Dr. Tony have been talking about this whole ideal of all things in common. Matter of fact, the whole KDE group has been talking about it, but Dr. Tony is really, really like, I want in on this, right? And we did it before. So she actually has someone that she's doing something with. She's helping him build his house because he's going to operate a business in Mexico, right? It's a part of Mexico. And the amount of money that it takes for him to build his house, like compared to us, it's about $5,000 US. So she was like, you know, I'm gonna help finance him building this house. And I was like, oh, I want in on this because I understood, although I can't give enough money to help someone build a house here, not a large amount of money, the amount that the difference on how far my dollars stretch in this other area is actually me giving what's the word I'm looking for? Radically generous, right? And so I did that, you know, recently. I think last month we did that, right? Yesterday, I had a client that came in for a massage service. My massage was $115 in office for a 90-minute massage. She gave me $265. So the tip was way and above more than the actual service, right? The generosity that came back was astoundingly generous, right? And I said to her, I was like, once I realized how much she gave me, I said, oh, thank you for your really generous tip and this, that, and the other. And she said, well, you're worth way more than that, right? But the reason I bring that up is because I intentionally, out of my funds in my business, even knowing that I was going to have, you know, bills came up and I didn't have enough to pay this particular bill just because I hadn't been doing a lot of massage lately. And I know I would get it at the end, right? But at the time, I didn't have the fullness of it. But I gave what looked like would be sacrificially out of that account to go towards this other person because I'm like, man, this is an opportunity to get in on this generosity. And what I make happen for this person, you know, eventually God will make happen for me. Well, I'm just letting you know that I believe that this was the first fruits of increase into my business for what I did generously outside of it. Now, was that good stewardship to give? You know, as much as I'll tell you what I gave. I think I gave $300. You know, you're not supposed to, you know, but I'm not doing this for any, God knows my heart, right? But I gave $300. And the first fruit that has come back was something like 100, and I don't know what it was. It was that 115 minus 265 is 130 something, somewhere around there, I think. But
you asking me to subtract and add real quick?
I'm just in case someone in the comments can do all that, right? I'm just putting it out there. I was able to be radically generous somewhere else. And God brought the finances, not from the same place where you're generous, right? Because that's not how the kingdom of heaven works. You know, when you're generous, you're sowing into, you know, you're being like God. Generosity is when we're most like God, because God gives, knowing that we can't give him back the same measure. Right? So when we're generous with other people, knowing that they can't give back the same measure, that's not necessarily good stewardship. But if you're doing it with the right heart, that's being generous. Right? And God will bring it back. Whatever you have, you'll have more of, right? And even if we look at Matthew 25 and 29, it talks about the one who had 10 bags, the one that didn't do anything with what he had. He said, well, take that bag from him and give it to the one who had 10. You know, I think that's verse 28. And whoever has will be given more. So he operated in stewardship, right? Because he did more than what he needed to do, even with his master's money. He could have the one that had 10 talents could have put the money on deposit in the bank as well and got something from that. But he was like, nope, my master has this. Let me think of the best ways I can do to make sure I increase my master's money. He did that. And what came is what he had 10 more when the master came back. He was generous in his stewardship because he didn't have to steward at that level. Right. And what happens from that? He got more, you know, give the bag from the one that didn't do anything with it, give it to him. And then also we see in other examples where Jesus would say, oh, this person did this with a minus. You know, they had 10 minus and they gained 10 more. Oh, no, they had 10 minus and they, you know, gained 10 more. Now give that person 10 cities to manage. Like it's like exponential growth. But I think that's what happens with generosity. We tap into heaven. Stewardship is about managing on the earth.
Yeah.
You know, qualifying on the earth. But generosity is about tapping into the heavens.
That's good. Yeah.
So anyways, let me stop for a moment because I know I'm unloading a lot.
But that's all good. You know, I love everything that you just said. And I just really love that generosity is about tapping into the heavens. That right there, because it does a couple of things. It humbles you, number one, because you know it comes from heaven and it's not coming from you. So if you're giving or you're being generous, and again, you're like, well, look what I did. Well, look what I did. Then you know that's not kingdom, because you didn't, again, that wisdom piece, you didn't seek the wisdom of God to even see what he had for you in this season to give, right? To be generous with. And just the ability to be able to do it means you have to rely. There's a surrender in that, because I have to say, this is a kingdom thing, and that brings glory to God. Right. That brings glory to God. And so and I think that's the main thing. Y'all might hear my dog barking because he's back there playing with something. I don't know what he's doing. We'll have a conversation about him barking in a minute. But I love that. And Arlene, she said that she has something to share, but I told her to go on and type it out because she said she feels weird talking about it. You know, and that kind of brought me to something, is that it's important to sometimes our stories of generosity are testimony to someone else of what it looks like, right? So I remember the year when I was like, okay, God, I really want to start giving, but you know, my coins, Lord, they short. What I don't know what to do. And he said, give 10. And I was like, 10, and I got quiet and I was like, what do you mean give 10? Give $10 to different organizations. It was like, how many 10s can you afford to give? And I looked at my budget and I was like, 3. Get $30, right? So I found 3 different organizations to pour $10 into, right? And the blessing was that as I did that, and when I did it, even though I could give it, it was still a stretch for me. So I was really praying and go, okay, God, you're telling me the power of 10. And every year he would have me increase it. Some people, it might have been increase it by $5, increase it by $10. And get this, he wasn't telling me to look at my budget. He was telling me where to increase it. Right. And I'm like, huh? And so I just obeyed where he said to increase it. And before I knew it, I was like, I'm giving almost 3 times as much a month than I was giving when we first started this thing. And I'm not complaining, and I'm just giving. And the power of that is that it was always there for me to give, right? Last year, he began to tell me to give away books. Right. I'm still doing the money part. He began to tell me to give away books. And I was like, well, that's more money, because books are not necessarily cheap, right? and he would tell me, like, to put a post up and give away 3 of these books, or put a post up and give away 5 of these books. And I would go, Lord, that's 100, but the money was always there because and then I look at how it has blessed people for me to give them books that they may not have been able to afford, or and here's me telling my story of generosity because it'll bless somebody else. Start at 10. God might tell you to start at 5. Right? He might, and the funny thing is that's how I started with with a ministry that I pour into, and I have given the same $5. God hasn't told me to increase it. I've been given the same $5 since 2019, I think it is, maybe 2018. But get this, when they send out like partner letters or whatever, I get the same thing that all the other partners get. It might be a book. It might be access to a course. I get the same thing that everybody else gets. The reward doesn't change because my obedience was, because when I gave that $5 that day, I don't think I had $1 in the bank. But God said, give 5. That's all I got in my wallet.
That's
So I
it.
think, it's a blessing to be able to just hear God, because he's gonna stretch you, but he's not gonna stretch you so far where it will break you.
Yep. And that's it. That's it's about not grinding even in this, right? But it's about exercising these muscles. You have to exercise your generosity muscle. And if you decouple it from stewardship, it helps you to just exercise that. How can I be generous? Not look for, well, is this organization worthy of what I'm going to give? That don't matter. What you're practicing now is exercising generosity. If they're not worthy of it, that's even more generous. If they are worthy, then you're practicing stewardship. It's like, so you're working on two different, it's almost like the analogy that I gave last week of the bodybuilder versus the power lifter. You're looking for different results, right? The more generous you are, the more one-time output you receive back, right? The greater steward you are, the more return of the stuff you got, the more you always are stewarding certain, right? They're different, you're training different aspects, they're different practices. And another thing I wanted to talk about with the grind, like the reason why the grind works is not because you're grinding, it's because of the practice that you do in the grinding. So imagine someone that's playing football, right? They get used to doing these drills all the time, but in their mind, they're not thinking about them grinding. They're saying, okay, well, I got to practice this because my footwork is bad. I got to practice it. And as they're doing that, they're stewarding getting better footwork. And that's why they get increased from it. Well, the grind works because even if you're doing it with the wrong mind, the wrong hard posture, you are at least practicing it. And so there is stewardship, there is an increase that will come from it. But you don't get the supernatural, right? Because you're not necessarily doing it with the right heart. Right. But anyways, that's a side point.
That's good. That's good. Althea shared something, and I want to address it. And she says, I'm not currently generous with money, but I am generous with my time and calling people who are homebound at this time. And I call and speak with them. Is this the same thing? Well, it all depends on your heart posture behind it. It depends on what your heart is in not giving the money. Right. So are you not giving it because you feel like you don't have it? Then I would talk to God, because I thought I didn't have it. You know what I'm saying? And so, and I was listening to Anthony Evans was at the concert last night, and he shared this story about, those organizations where you can sponsor a kid to go to school and, in third world countries and do different things or what have you. And he was saying that he thought his friend, he said, I got a good friend. I thought he was a liar. I thought that organization was nothing until God showed him and he actually met the kid that they wanted him to sponsor. And he was like, yeah, but I don't even right now, how do I even squeeze out $45? He said, because, right now gas is $45 million, he said, so how do I squeeze it out? So the man showed him, he said, look at everything that you do and pay attention to your receipts. What do you repeat all the time? And he realized what he was repeating was a cup of Starbucks coffee every day. And he was like, can you give up that cup of coffee for this kid? Because he had actually met the kid at a hospital, right? In Mexico, I think this kid was from. He said, and this kid just needed something, and I didn't know because I wasn't giving. I didn't honor what my friend asked me to honor because I thought he was lying. He said, I thought it was a joke, and it wasn't. He said, and I saw where, wait a minute, I spent almost $45 in Starbucks a week. Surely I can give up a week. And make sure this kid is taken care of for education, medical, because all he needed at that time when he met the kid, all his mother needed was $45 to get him medical care. That was it. So if you gave that $45 a month, not only would he get medical care, but he can get clothes, he can go to school, he can get good education, all these different things. And he was like, and all I had to do was look at what I repeat. Right. So it was a hard thing for him, and he had to be course corrected on that. So there's nothing wrong with what you're doing. But if you're not giving financially because you're going, I ain't got it, it ain't there, you need to, go sit and have a conversation with God, because if he's telling you, you can do it, then he's providing a way for it to be done.
Mm-hmm. And even if he's not telling you, but you desire to see that, you need to do it. Because the bottom line is you'll reap what you sow.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're sowing time, you're going to get an abundance of time back.
Mm-hmm.
Is time what you need from other people?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then keep sowing it.
Right.
But if you need finances, if you sow financially, what you will reap is an abundance of finances.
Mm-hmm.
Every seed produces after its own kind. That is a kingdom truth, regardless of how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want a return financially, you have to find a way to begin to increase your giving financially.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's just how it works.
Yeah.
As long as the earth remains, there'll be seed, time, and harvest. I never planted an orange seed and got an apple. That's just not how it works.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I like that. I like that a lot. And I think I love that. If you give your tithe monthly and that's where God is telling you that's where your generosity is, then that's fine. But again, and this was to anybody. We have to always check our heart posture in how we're giving or how we're not giving, right? Because my heart posture was poor thinking. Like I'm not doing that. I need that money, So, I get $5. That's all I got in my wallet right now. You want me to give this man $5? And and it's just been a blessing, Arlene does want to share, so I'm going to bring her up. And if you want to say anything while I bring her up, Phil, you can. But this is a good conversation, and thank you, Arlene, for coming up. I appreciate that. I think that just the more that we share, it just blesses others tremendously. Darlene, you can unmute and you can share your story.
Okay. But first, I have to say I really enjoy your stories, Latara.
Thank you.
I'm going to make it short. Last year, the beginning of the year, I didn't know that I would not be working for about 3.5 months. So the beginning of the year, my daughter was moving, and I went into my savings, and I wrote her a very large check. Just gave it to her because I knew she needed it. And before that, I have a few places around here that I like to donate to because I think they're really good places. And one of them is the free medical clinic, because when I couldn't afford medical insurance, I got such great service from that clinic. So once I started working, that one was one other place. And one day it was just on my heart. It was a Saturday morning, and I just went to the bank. I asked the teller if she could give me cashier's check without my information on those checks. So, and she says, yes, we can just, make it out to whomever, and we'll just leave just the bank information. And I went ahead and I got two checks. One of the places I couldn't remember, so I ended up having to leave to go find the information. Went back to the bank. I was waiting for her, but somebody was ahead of me and they went. And so I went to the other teller, and when the other teller was asking her what she needed to do, she says, it's okay, I'll take care of her. And she took care of me, and she did the same thing with the same check. Total between my daughter and these funds, it was over $1,400. And I just took that from my savings. I didn't think about it. I didn't wonder about it. I just did it. I don't even know why I did it. It was just, it's like a voice just said, you needed to do this. So I did it. And then about 2.5 months later, I was jobless. And I was just like, okay, we'll see how this works. And I applied for unemployment, and I'm still waiting on it. And they screwed it up. So they're trying to resolve it. There was like potential fraud and everything. But the basis of the story is when I was doing my taxes, I got my W-2 and I saw how much I made that whole year. And I thought to myself, this can't be right, because I wasn't blessed financially, but I was blessed in terms of all my needs were taken care of. I've told maybe 3 people this story because even now I'm still in awe of how much I made. And my rent got paid on time. I was never late on any of my bills. I had food. I like my organic stuff. I'm not gonna lie. And I was able to purchase my organic food and all my needs were fulfilled to the point that I wanted to get these new sneakers and I was able to get the new sneakers. And when I look at how much I made for the whole year and how much I was never in need of anything, and the key word here is need. I even got things that I wanted, sneakers.
That's good.
And I was just like, I'm still in awe that I made that little bit of money. I mean, it was less than $30,000. I made it was such a small amount. I'm just like, I don't understand. It was when I first recognized that, I was just like, I don't understand. I didn't make any money last year, but I was at all the stuff that I was able to do, and I gave my time. I was volunteering during the time that I wasn't working. So, and I never really thought about it. And it was just, I mean, I don't give tithe like I used to on a consistent basis, but because I usually just write a check for tithe, but I just kind of like whatever you have, because I keep thinking about the lady and her mite, and I just like whatever I have, I give, so it's just, and I do cash. So there's no expectation. Like, when I used to write a check, I was like, yeah, I get to write this off at the end of the year. But now I'm just like, whatever cash amount I have, I just give it. It's more like an offering. So that's how I felt like God blessed me, because I was being generous without thought. I didn't like, how much am I going to have? I just did what the still small voice told me to do. And I felt like I was blessed, not financially, but in so many other, and there's a lot of more ways I could tell you I was blessed that year, but I won't waste your time.
But Arlene, here's the perspective shift. Just because it didn't come into your hands don't mean that you weren't blessed financially. Because it takes finances to live this life, right? It takes finances to buy the shoes, right? The Lord had to show me a long time ago that He is also the Lord of the decrease. So just because it doesn't come into your possession, into your hands to pay it, don't mean that it wasn't a financial blessing, right?
That's true.
That's good.
So it's just a perspective shift, and and then that helps you see that level of generosity that you put out there. You help someone else, and in your time of need, you were helped. Like that's the key to uncoupling this whole generosity thing, because so anyway, sorry to cut you off.
That was good, but I thank you, Arlene, for sharing. I love that, because that perspective shift was important. And I remember one time God showed me, He was like, provision will not always come through you, but it will come to you, right? So I was like, oh my gosh. And that's when I was at one of my lowest points financially. And, we trying to get kicked out this house and all that. I'm like, I don't know how we gonna do this. And I had to look differently at how provision came. Right. And it's been a blessing for me all the way through now. Since experiencing that, I'm able to sit and say, provision won't always come through you, but it will come to you, because God is provision. Right. And so we have to learn how to really rely on that. And one of the things that He always says to me is, when I'm in this financial, I go, okay, God, this is happening. He goes, do you trust me? And then He shows me the history. Do you remember when? He's never left me or forsaken me. I've always had what I needed. I may not have always had what I wanted, but I've always had what I needed. And then I would get some of the wants, just like Arlene got those tennis shoes. So thank you, Arlene, for sharing. I'm gonna bring Dr. Linda up. And
you're welcome, Latara.
Thank you, Arlene. I appreciate you. Okay. All right, Dr. Linda.
Thank you so much. A couple of things here. I was grateful to hear you guys. Notice I'm taking notes. I was so grateful to hear you guys mention the importance of our heart
Mhm.
in what we do. And then through everything that you guys were saying, the Lord showed me that the generosity and stewardship can be seen as an act of gratitude and honoring God. So when we get so little and we don't take care of it, well, okay, let me correct. So little and we don't take care of it, even the little that we have had to come through God. And for us to appreciate his provision, that can be shown in our stewardship. So that's one thing he taught me. And then Latara, when you talked about your experience with the $10, that was really important because that really struck my heart, because I'm always of the mindset, well, if I can't give the full 10%, then anything less is not going to mean a dang thing. Most importantly, the thread through everything that you guys said today was listen to God. Know that he's a God of the heart, that, you can do the right thing for all the wrong reasons and it ain't going to turn out so hot. And if we could remember that it's all about us having a heart of obedience toward God, knowing that we need to be teachable before him and keeping our ear to the spiritual ground through our close relationship with him, then we can know when we're getting off track or we're looking at something wrong. God's been dealing with me about my heart positioning all year.
Yeah.
And I can't, we ain't gonna talk about how that's been played out in my business. So thank you, you guys. I'm really grateful that you guys do this. I know it takes your time, but I want you to know I appreciate it from my heart.
Thank you, Dr. Linda.
Thank you, Dr.
Appreciate you. Those were good shares. I appreciate you. Yes, so good. So good. That heart posturing is, it was your wife that taught me that lesson about heart posturing and our finances and provision. And I was so mad at her when she told me my heart wasn't postured right. And I was like, no, I love the Lord, blah, 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 blah. But the thing is that I was coming from here and not from my heart, right? Not from my soul. I was coming from how I was thinking, and my thinking was very poor. I had a poverty mindset. And even in what most people would consider being a low income earner at one time, God taught me how to have a generous and prosperous mindset, if that makes sense, right? And I always think about my son too, when he would be struggling, but he would still give his tithe. And one of the things he said to me just blew my mind. He said, Mom, I give out of my abundance. And I was like, but you ain't got, in my head, I was like, you ain't got nothing. But he taught me a lesson in that he didn't see that as him not having. He saw that as I have more than enough. So I'm going to do what God is telling me to do. I'm going to give. Yeah. And he's a generous giver.
And if you think about that, giving out of his abundance, that just shows the mindset that he has. It's like the widow's mite, right? Because I don't have a little, because I have a little and I give out of my little, I'm giving in my abundance. Because what I'm giving is a greater amount of the totality of what I have. So for someone that doesn't have a lot, radical generosity is giving a little. So that's why, like, it hit me this one day when I was thinking about this gentleman that it only cost him $5,000 to build his dream house to operate his business out of. And that's something that, according to my finances, I could probably go half in on that. So in his economy, my little $2,000, which is in the grand scheme of things, not a whole lot of money in American money right now, whatever, right? That's not a lot of money. But in his economy, it's the equivalent of half a house. That's a lot. Even though it's not a lot on my end, once I put it in this economy, it's a lot. And it's the same thing in reverse. Like when you don't have a lot and you give. It's a lot. If I'm a billionaire and I give $5,000, that's less than Someone like Arlene, who only made $30,000 that year, giving $5. Because in my multitude, I have way more, and that's such a small percentage of what I have, right?
Yeah.
So giving in his much, when you don't have a lot, I have more than enough. What I give is abundance. It's like it's a whole paradigm shift, and we got to unlock that. And I think generosity helps to unlock it. Just be generous in whatever way that you feel is generosity in the moment, in the season, and you're exercising those generosity muscles, and eventually you'll get to the point where you're giving, way more than you feel like. Well, most people would feel like you should, and you will never run out.
Right.
That's why these people that like who is it? The CEO of Caterpillar, he got to the point where he was giving away 90% of what he brought in, and he was living off of 10%. But because he was always generous, he worked his way up to that, to the point where his 10% was more than what a lot of people's 100% is.
Yeah.
Right. But it started from being generous with whatever he had. And then eventually he became more generous, and he never ran out. That's not good. Most people wouldn't think that's good stewardship. Why would you give away 90%? If you have the capacity to manage that much money, good stewardship would be you managing it. You could do a lot of good with that. Well, he's like, no, I can give it away and other people can do good. I don't have to take the responsibility of doing all the good myself. My good is to give it to someone else and let them participate in this good as well.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and I think that's a lesson. And he's not the first person that I've heard of that lives off of 10%, of their income. And I think about the gentleman that the gym that AJ manages. And he's a multimillionaire, and he gives. I mean, he paid off AJ's car at the beginning of this year. He was like, you guys are great to have a baby, and you don't need that extra car note and blah, blah, blah. So let me just pay this off so you're done, and there was an offer that came across the table this week. Someone had this cash offer for the gym, and he was like, I'm not going to leave you out. I want to make sure that if I do sell, that you're in there, because, his thing is your family, and we take care of family. And just to watch how generous he is with my son, it blew my mind, and I had to thank him for that. And he even told my youngest son, always live off of less than what you make. Learn how to live, and Brayhan was like, he said, I live off of this percentage. And I was like, he shared it, and it was just and he is so generous, and he keeps getting blessed because of his generosity.
There it is. Eternal dwellings. Not just in heaven.
Yeah.
I think there are eternal dwellings in the earth too, in our generosity, right? But anyways, that's just my opinion.
This was good. This is good. And a lot of us wouldn't want to live off. I'll be honest with you, unless God came to me and said live off of 10%. I'm like, I still got a way to go, right? So, but if God said do it, then I would do it, because I know He's gonna take care of me. Yeah. Anything else, Phil?
That's it. I'm not going to just be making stuff up. I think we've had a rich discussion.
We have, now, me, I always tell myself, when the Holy Spirit says time to chill, then we just chill. Because if we keep talking, then we just talking. What are we talking about? If it's time to shut it, right? So this was good. This was really good. And I know it was challenging. You guys were a little quieter this week. So here's a suggestion for you. Go back and watch the video when it comes up on the page, or go back and listen to it on the podcast, on KDE podcast. And really, Dr. Tony always loves to give a question, and so I think if I were to, give you a question you could take to God, she always gives you questions you could take to God. It would be, Father, are there any areas where my heart is not right towards being generous, or even being a good steward, whichever one you struggle with? Talk to God about that and keep having the conversation. If you get an answer, ask another question, right? Keep talking about it, so that, because He wants to have rich dialogue with you. He doesn't just want to go, well, here's the answer. He wants you to, how little kids go, but Daddy, why? But what's the moon? What are dishes? Well, why you gotta wash them? Well, how do they get dirty? They keep asking you questions, and you might go, oh my gosh, I wish they would be quiet. But God doesn't. He wants to keep having the conversation with you. right? So I challenge you, and this was a challenging conversation, and it should have been, right? Because we do have to check our heart postures. And so this was good. Hamilton said this was good for him. Thank you so much. Lots of lessons here, Phil. You always bring the fire, man.
Yeah, well, I think this is the pre-work that we have to do for the capacity upgrade, right?
Yeah.
And if we don't realize that there's a muscle to work, we're not
Yeah.
going to work it. And so
Yeah.
we won't be ready, right? Because that increase, I really believe the increase comes through the level of generosity.
Mhm. Yeah.
The increased responsibility comes from your stewardship.
Yeah.
But the
That's
actual
good.
increase
Mhm.
from that generosity.
That's good. This
Anyway,
was so
that's
good.
our
This
number.
was so good. And yeah, and just, I quickly just want to share that I'm in a season of where God is having me to still be generous while he is telling me to be a better steward of my dollar. So I just had to share that. Don't y'all be thinking that when we talking that we like in a space of perfect. All right, everyone. You all have a good week, and we'll see you all next Friday.
Yeah, practice your generosity.
Bye-bye.